We're talking about taking your qualitative data analysis with NVivo, well, way beyond the basics,
Yeah, that's right.
moving past that initial, tagging phase to really organize and analyze things effectively, getting those richer findings,
hmm
and crucially, keeping you from feeling completely swamped by your data, which is easy to do.
Oh, absolutely. So our goal in this deep dive really is to pull out the core strategies,
Mm,
how to refine your code structures, how to move into, let's say, more sophisticated analysis,
right.
and also how to use visuals to actually see the patterns in your data.
Okay.
And, while in vivo is our main example here, these fundamental principles,
hmm
they'll boost your effectiveness with pretty much any qualitative analysis approach.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The material makes it really clear that just assigning those initial codes, that's only the starting point.
Just the beginning.
It highlights this idea of iterative coding, like constantly questioning your data
Huh.
and letting that process actually help develop your theory. There's this compelling example from Dalkin and colleagues.
Yeah, the realist evaluation one.
Right. Using NVivo, working with diverse data literature, interviews, all sorts.
Different sources.
And they kept linking memos to their codes to track how their understanding was, taking shape.
It's a great way to document that thinking process.
It sounds like NVivo gives you a way to make that whole, sometimes messy process much more uh, rigorous and transparent.
Exactly. And that's not just about being thorough. It's about making sure your insights are really well grounded, traceable.
Okay.
What's fascinating here is how your focus naturally shifts. So initially, you're really down in the weeds, right? Looking at the individual
Yeah,
files.
transcript by transcript.
But as you start applying codes, these repeated central ideas, these core experiences people are describing, they start to kind of crystallize within your coding framework itself.
Ah, okay. So you see them across files.
Precisely. You begin seeing the connections between these ideas. And just as importantly, you start noticing the things that don't quite fit the picture that's emerging,
Hmm.
the nuances, the contradictions.
Right. Yeah, outliers.
Yeah, and this is where that concept of recontextualization becomes so valuable.
Recontextualization. Okay, that sounds important. But what does it actually mean for how you analyze things? What's the practical difference?
Well, coding fundamentally changes how you look at your data. It's no longer just about sticking labels on bits of text.
Okay.
The coded segments themselves, they become units of analysis. Think of them almost like individual pieces of a puzzle.
Right, right.
You're shifting from just identifying themes to actively looking at how those themes play out across different parts of your data.
So like how one theme shows up differently for different people.
Exactly. Or maybe in different contexts, like different organizations you studied. This lets you get a much deeper, much more nuanced understanding.
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Because as you build up all these codes, the material points out that just having a long, messy list, that really isn't helping you much.
Not at all. It becomes unwieldy.
It emphasizes creating conceptual order, organizing your codes into hierarchies. So instead of that one overwhelming list,
Yeah.
you start grouping related codes into like logical branches. It even mentions that sometimes codes you thought were separate actually need to be brought together under a broader category.
Mm-hmm. Finding the connections.
And this isn't just for neatness, is it? It's about building a structure that actually helps you ask more complex questions later on.
Precisely. Think of it like organizing a big department store, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't just have a random list of every single item.
No, that would be useless.
You'd group them. Clothing, electronics, home goods, whatever. The same logic applies to your codes. The material talks about this thinking sorting process. You have to really think about the fundamental nature of each concept.
Mm,
Ask yourself, what kind of thing is this really about? What bigger category does it naturally fit into?
right.
It even suggests practical things like making physical lists or, going back to earlier chapters or notes if you're struggling to see those connections.
And I liked the idea of visually mapping your codes too, like literally moving them around on a screen
Yeah, that can be really helpful.
to see how they might cluster together naturally. And also the suggestion to just try describing your project out loud to someone else.
Oh, absolutely.
Often just trying to explain it helps you pinpoint those core issues, doesn't it? And maybe the main branches for your coding structure.
Definitely. Sometimes just verbalizing it brings this unexpected clarity to your thinking. The material then guides us to focus on those top-level codes, the really broad ones,
Like emotions, events.
right? Environmental issues, things like that. And then there are those structural code hanger codes, as they call them.
Yeah, they act as these frameworks that more specific codes can kind of hang from.
That online shopping analogy really did make it click for me.
Yeah.
You have the main departments, clothing, kitchen. Then within clothing, you have subcategories like type, then maybe color, size.
Exactly.
It makes perfect sense how that kind of hierarchy makes it so much easier to find what you need.
Navigation becomes intuitive.
And the material stresses you constantly have to check. Is this structure actually helping me answer my research questions?
Mm-hmm. Is it serving the purpose?
And if it's not, you've got to be ready to tweak it, change the structure, or maybe even rethink your initial research focus a bit.
Absolutely. It's not set in stone.
It's not static, right?
Yeah.
It should evolve as your understanding evolves.
That's a critical insight. Your coding structure should be, a living reflection of how your understanding is developing. The material also offers some useful guidelines,
Yeah.
like aiming for maybe no more than about 10 top-level hierarchies.
Okay, 10 sounds manageable, and generally not going deeper than 2 or 3 layers. Any more than that can get complicated.
Right.
And a good rule of thumb, if you find yourself with, say, more than 30 codes at just one level,
Uh-huh.
that's usually a sign you probably need to group them further into subcategories. Break it down more.
Okay, that makes sense. And it makes a clear distinction between using folders in NVivo and using hierarchies.
Yes, that's important.
Folders are more for organizing your types of data, right? Like interviews here, surveys there, which helps when you want to run a query on just one type.
Exactly, for scoping your queries.
But hierarchies are specifically for organizing the conceptual groups of codes, that tree-like structure we've been talking about.
Right, making them easy to access
Yeah.
conceptually for exploring relationships between themes. Think folders for raw materials.
And hierarchies for emerging ideas. Got it.
Exactly. Going back to that shopping website again. The folders might be the departments.
Right.
The hierarchies are how the products within the clothing department are organized maybe by type, then size, then color. And the material points out that when you put together an outfit in this analogy, you're essentially making those theoretical connections between the codes, seeing how different coded bits relate and build a bigger picture.
I like that. Putting together the theoretical outfit.
Yeah. And it's so important that the principles behind your own system are consistent and clear,
Yeah.
transparent. Even though, yeah, different researchers might code the same data differently depending on their focus,
Sure.
the logic of your system needs to be solid and easy to follow.
Okay. So why bother with all this sorting into hierarchies? What are the real advantages?
Well, the material lays out some really compelling reasons beyond just, being tidy.
Okay.
First, organization. Obvious, maybe, but crucial. It brings order, makes it easier to find codes you already have, and helps you decide where new ones fit.
Makes sense.
Second, conceptual clarity. This is huge. It pushes you to really define your ideas, spot overlaps or gaps in your thinking,
Yeah.
and see the common threads. It actually helps you see the inherent structure of your data. It even makes the point that someone else should be able to look at your coding system and get a good sense of your research questions.
Wow, that's powerful. Your structure communicates your research focus.
Exactly. It shows the power of a well-defined structure.
And it also says that hierarchies actually prompt you to code more richly. How does that work?
Well, when you're coding a piece of text, just seeing your organized hierarchy can act as a kind of visual prompt. It reminds you to consider different aspects,
Like,
the context, who was involved, the emotions, the outcomes. It's like having a visual checklist that encourages you to be more comprehensive, more multi-layered in your coding.
okay, a cognitive prompt. I like that.
Absolutely. And finally, hierarchies make identifying patterns way easier because you can query associations between different groups of codes much more simply.
So, like, connecting emotions with specific events.
Precisely. If you have an emotions hierarchy and an events hierarchy, you can easily explore which emotions pop up most often with certain types of events. That kind of analysis is much more manageable with a good hierarchy.
It was interesting seeing those examples of common top-level codes, too. Actions, beliefs, context, emotions, events,
Yeah, the predictable ones.
issues, people, balances like attitudes. It makes sense. These broad categories often form the foundation when you're analyzing, human experiences.
Definitely. And it's important not to forget those more process-oriented or administrative codes, too.
Like good quotes.
Yeah, or suggestions for research, retired code, things like that. They can be incredibly useful for just managing the whole analysis process.
Right? Practical stuff.
The material really emphasizes being willing to experiment, revise your system as needed, even try unconventional codes if they help your analysis. And it briefly mentions using NVivo's mapping tools.
Mind maps, concept maps.
Yeah, project maps too.
Yeah.
As visual aids to help think through the structure. We can touch more on those later, perhaps.
Okay. Now, this next bit, healthy versus unhealthy hierarchies. The viral versus vista coding idea. That was a real eye-opener.
Ah, yes, the code virus.
The viral system where you end up duplicating codes all over the place, like having attitudes nested under every single issue you look at. That sounds like a guaranteed way to create utter chaos.
It truly can be. The virus metaphor is pretty apt because, as the material shows, even a modest scheme of, say, 30 codes could just explode into 120 if you start duplicating them like that.
Wow.
And that leads to so many problems. Your structure becomes incredibly hard to navigate. Your data gets scattered everywhere. Try finding all mentions of positive sentiment. It's a nightmare.
Right, you'd have to look in multiple places.
Exactly. It complicates your queries. You often have to merge results, and the whole system can just spiral. A detailed codebook becomes absolutely essential then, just to try and keep track.
But it's still not ideal for analysis.
Far from it. Which is why the vista structure is presented as the solution.
The antidote. I like the Grand Canyon analogy, different viewing platforms giving you different perspectives on the same landscape.
Yeah, it's a good visual. So instead of duplicating codes, you have these separate main hierarchies or vistas, like one for attitudes, another for the specific issues.
Okay.
So if someone says something positive about the economy, you code that specific bit of text under positive in the attitudes vista and under economy in the issues vista. The data lives in one place.
But you can look at it through different lenses.
Exactly. Multiple analytical lenses.
Yeah.
This double coding approach, like in that Dr. Traits example.
Right, coding for manners and negative experience.
Yeah. It avoids all that redundancy and the problems of the viral structure. And as that example shows, the Vista approach really unlocks the power of exploring intersections using things like matrix coding queries.
So you could easily see, say, if negative comments about issue X are linked more to anger or fear.
Precisely that kind of thing. Much easier to investigate.
Yeah. So Vista coding fixes the viral problems. It's more streamlined, easier to manage.
Parsimonious.
Keeps data in one place, makes queries more powerful for seeing those code combinations.
Code constellations, as they sometimes call them.
And stops that crazy viral growth. It's all about efficiency and analytical clarity.
Spot on. And the material gives two key rules to avoid going viral. First, each distinct code should really live in only one main place in your hierarchy.
Okay, one home for each code.
And second, keep your case attribute data like demographics separate from your thematic codes. Don't mix them in the same hierarchy.
Right, attributes are different from themes.
And the good news, even if you find yourself tangled up in a viral system, you can almost always restructure it into a vista without starting over.
That's reassuring. Okay, so another big theme is this balancing act between flexibility and stability in coding.
Ah, yes. The eternal tension.
You need to adapt as you learn more from the data, but you also need consistency over time. How do you manage that?
It's a core challenge in qualitative work. The material suggests a few key strategies. First, really use that code description field. Define the code clearly and document how your understanding of it evolves.
Like a mini log for each code.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Second, if your hierarchy itself changes significantly, track those changes in a linked memo. It helps you reconstruct your analytical journey.
Good idea.
And third, talk about your coding system with others, colleagues, supervisors. Getting fresh eyes can reveal inconsistencies or areas for improvement you might miss.
Yeah, that outside perspective is invaluable. Those are really practical tips. And it also touches on that related balance between completeness and parsimony.
Right. How many codes are enough? Too many. Too few. How much context to code?
Exactly. It's just making sure your code descriptions are crystal clear. Think about combining codes that are too fuzzy or similar.
Or splitting ones that are too broad.
Right. And when in doubt about context, maybe code a bit more initially. You can always uncode later.
That's generally good advice. Err on the side of caution initially. It really boils down to ongoing review and reflection. That's essential.
Absolutely. And that leads nicely into this idea of closeness and distance with your coded data.
Shifting perspectives.
The analogies are great, like the difference between hearing about new parenthood versus being a new parent, different levels of understanding.
Very relatable.
So in coding terms, closeness is like really diving deep into one person's story. Detailed coding, recoding, writing reflective memos on just that.
Yeah, that deep immersion. Distance, on the other hand, is stepping back, looking at the bigger picture, the combined data from everyone, or the overall patterns in code frequency.
Okay, so it's about deliberately moving between those perspectives, not just plodding through the coding mechanically.
Exactly. Avoid just getting stuck in one mode. The material suggests concrete things you can do. Read transcripts you haven't seen in a while, sort your data by code frequency,
Uh-huh.
use NVivo's coding stripes feature to see how codes overlap or stand alone.
Those sound like great ways to shake things up and get a fuller picture. Prevent getting tunnel vision.
Precisely. Encourages a more nuanced, multifaceted interpretation. Now, shall we talk about some of the automated tools?
Yes. The ones that can help with the more routine stuff, freeing up time for the thinking part.
Exactly. Auto-coding and text mining queries are the key examples here.
The idea of automatic coding is definitely tempting, especially with big data sets. It mentions auto-coding by speaker or by question,
Yeah, huge time saver for structured data.
like formatted interviews or surveys. And then the text mining queries, word frequency, text search, helping find key terms and pattern.
And it also touches on those more experimental auto-code features for sentiment, themes, even learning from your existing coding patterns.
Right, the AI-driven ones.
But, and this is crucial, it rightly emphasizes a big note of caution with those more conceptual auto-coding tools, meaning anything coded automatically, especially sentiment or themes, should always be treated as preliminary. It needs careful human review and validation. Always.
Got it. Don't just trust the machine completely. Let's dig into sentiment coding a bit. NVivo can automatically spot positive and negative statements using algorithms.
That's the idea. It creates codes like very positive, moderately negative, usually under a main sentiment folder.
The TripAdvisor review example was interesting, showing potential efficiency but also the limits.
Absolutely. Sarcasm, double negatives, slang, idioms. AI struggles with that nuanced stuff.
So it's not perfect.
Far from it. The material wisely suggests, assuming maybe 80% accuracy, best case scenario, and stresses you must manually check and validate the results. It's a starting point, not a final answer.
Okay. But it can give you a broad suite, especially with lots of short responses.
Exactly. And those detailed child codes like very positive, roll up, or aggregate to the parent positive and negative codes, giving you that summarized overview.
And trying it seems simple enough. Home autocode identify sentiment.
Yeah, the steps are straightforward. Useful first pass for emotional tone, especially with large volumes of text, but always review.
Right. Now, auto-coding by structural features sounds more reliable.
Generally, yes. This uses algorithms to spot consistent formatting patterns, heading styles. Speaker turns in a transcript.
Ah, like host speaker, followed by speech.
Exactly. And it creates codes based on those structural cues. Super useful for separating speakers in interviews or focus groups.
Okay, so it can code everything said by participant A to a participant A code.
Or even create a case for participant A automatically. And it can code responses based on standardized questions in a survey.
That could seriously streamline the initial data organization if you've formatted consistently.
That's the key caveat. The material refers back to that simple speaker speech format as ideal for this. But it also warns strongly against trying to force this on unstructured data.
Right. Stick to manual coding for messy stuff.
Definitely. And it mentions guidance for auto-coding datasets like spreadsheets elsewhere, and also that powerful option of auto-coding based on existing coding patterns.
Where NVivo learns from your manual coding.
Yeah. Once you've coded a decent amount, it can try to apply those patterns elsewhere. Huge efficiency gain in big projects, potentially. But again, review is key.
Always review. Okay, so once you have that initial structure, the material stresses it's not rigid, right? You can change things.
Absolutely. Move codes, combine them if they're too similar, split them if they're too broad. It's all about refining as you understand the data better.
And reviewing your codes might even make you rethink other parts of your research, like sampling or questions.
It can, yeah. Coding is pattern seeking. And sometimes the patterns you find or don't find lead you to adjust your approach. It can feel a bit emergent.
That's where drawing on established methods helps, I guess, like Maxwell's 3 stages of coding.
Exactly. It provides a useful scaffold. You start with descriptive coding, the obvious stuff.
Barriers, enablers, things you were looking for.
Right. Then substantive coding, using participants' own words as codes, more grounded.
Okay.
And finally, abstract or theoretical coding, looking at it all through a conceptual lens, finding deeper meanings and connections.
Descriptive, substantive, abstract. I like that progression. And it's iterative, right? Not strictly linear.
Definitely iterative.
Yeah.
You might do 80% of descriptive, then start substantive, but then loop back to refined description based on new insights. Back and forth.
The jigsaw puzzle analogy worked well, too. Start with the easy bits, the
Zeros
edges.
and edges, yeah.
Then gradually the more subtle patterns emerge until the whole picture comes together. It really feels like that sometimes with qualitative analysis.
It does. And thinking in terms of content, concept, and context is another helpful frame. Describe the content, define concepts, maybe using literature. Then analyze the context, the relationships to build themes.
So as your code list grows and your hierarchy develops, pausing to review is critical.
Essential.
Ask, do the codes reflect my research questions? How often am I using each code? Can I merge or split any? Does my methodology need tweaking?
All good questions to ask periodically. And remember, your code lists and code books are a historical record.
Write the audit trail.
Exactly. Save dated versions. They're gold when writing up your methods, showing how your thinking evolved. You can even import them as memos in NVivo for annotation.
Smart. Okay, shifting focus slightly. Seeing the parts, looking at all the text coded to one specific code.
Yeah, moving from the file view to the code view. It offers a totally different perspective.
How so?
You see all the instances of that theme together, regardless of which participant or document they came from. Great for checking consistency in how you applied the code and for really reflecting on its meaning and scope.
You might spot connections you missed before?
Often, yes. The material gives practical tips. Open the code, read through the content. Use the hyperlink to jump back to the original source file if you need more context.
Okay.
Think about refining the code should it capture more text. Less. Can you recode segments directly from this view if you see a better fit elsewhere? Uncode irrelevant bits.
So the goal is making sure everything under that code really belongs there and is coded consistently.
Exactly. And look at the other codes applied to the same segments, using coding stripes. That shows intersections.
Right, seeing how themes overlap.
And after reviewing a code like this, update its description. Clarify boundaries, add examples. Justify why each code exists in your codebook. Note any candidates for merging or deleting.
And memo links are crucial here too, right? Specifically, memos linked to codes?
Yes. Memos linked to files are great for background initial thoughts, but code memos are where you develop your conceptual thinking about that category. The story of the code, invaluable for analysis and writing.
Okay. And for visual thinkers, concept maps can help structure codes, especially if you started coding more freely.
Definitely. Visually arranging codes, drawing connections. It helps identify potential hierarchies and, importantly, helps avoid that viral duplication because you typically only have one instance of each code on the map.
So you can see the potential structure visually.
Right. You can't directly create the hierarchy from the map with one click, but printing it out gives you a fantastic visual reference as you build or refine the hierarchy itself.
And it suggests revisiting any early mind maps too, seeing how they compare to your current structure.
Good practice. See how your thinking has evolved.
What about sets? How are they different from hierarchies?
Sets are more about showing theoretical connections between codes that might live in different hierarchical branches. They highlight associations based on a broader concept or theory, maybe a causal link you're proposing.
So they cut across the hierarchy.
Exactly. They're easy to create and modify, and they automatically update with more coding. Plus, they have practical uses in queries and maps, but their main strength is that conceptual reminder. These seemingly separate codes are linked.
Okay. Now, getting practical about hierarchies. Parent and child codes. Keep it fairly shallow, right? 2, maybe 3 levels deep.
That's the recommendation for practicality. And before you start dragging codes around...
Back up, back up, back up.
Absolutely. Golden rule. The material shows how for Mac and Windows. Then moving codes is usually just drag and drop or cut and paste. Creating new child codes is simple too, usually a right click.
Now, the tricky question. Code to the parent, the child, or both?
Yes, the classic, it depends. Code to capture the meaning accurately. Sometimes you might code broadly to a parent first, then refine it to a more specific child later.
Or sometimes you know the specific child code right away.
Right. And then you might use NVivo's aggregation feature later to see the rolled-up view at the parent level. The key is consistency.
Don't mix levels inconsistently for the same kind of data.
Exactly. Either code all to parent, then break down, or code all to children, then aggregate up. Pick a strategy and stick to it for related concepts.
And aggregation is temporary, right? Not like merging.
Correct. Aggregation dynamically includes the child coding when you view the parent. Merging is a one-time permanent combination. Aggregation works one level up at a time.
The environmental change example helped economy as parent with agriculture, fishing, etc. as children. You analyze at the aggregated economy level, but can drill down.
Precisely. But be aware, Uncoding at an aggregated parent can uncode the children too. And generally, avoid coding miscellaneous stuff directly to aggregated parents in a stable structure. Create a specific miscellaneous child code instead.
Okay, so merge or aggregate. The key differences.
Three main ones, summarized nicely in a table in the material. Merging physically moves data, cut copy. Aggregation just points to it. Merging isn't dependent on hierarchy. Aggregation relies on the immediate children. Merging is static, one time. Aggregation is dynamic, updates constantly.
Understanding that difference is crucial for choosing the right tool.
Absolutely. Now that question your coding activity where negative has way more references than positive is a great prompt.
Yeah, makes you stop and think, is this expected? Why might this be? How can I visualize it?
Exactly. Use a comparison diagram. Interrogate the patterns. Don't just accept them.
Which leads to reviewing the family generations in codes and that is it a sort of rule?
A really practical check for logical hierarchy placement.
Like overseas is a sort of place.
Yeah.
Child code.
Right. But positive is not a sort of overseas, no. It's a type of experience or attitude, so it belongs elsewhere, probably under an experience or attitude's parent.
That helps avoid the viral structure, where you might wrongly put positive-negative under every place or issue.
Exactly. That's the code virus again. If you have positive-negative duplicated under multiple different parents, that's a sign you need to restructure. Probably by merging all the positive codes into one central positive code in an appropriate hierarchy.
And then if someone talks about a positive overseas experience,
You code that text segment to both the positive code under experience attitudes and the overseas code under places, like using two different highlighters manually.
got it. So the hierarchy organizes the concepts, but you apply the relevant codes independently.
Precisely. NVivo doesn't inherently know positive relates to overseas just because one might be nested under the other incorrectly. You tell it by applying both codes. Then you can use matrix queries to explore the intersection positive experiences related to overseas locations.
Okay, and if you do have a viral structure, it's fixable.
Almost always, yes, without starting over.
Hmm.
Back up first. Then the steps are basically create temporary folders for old codes and new codes. Move everything under old. Build your new empty Vista structure under new.
Okay.
Then carefully copy and merge the duplicated codes from old into the correct single locations in new. Copy over any non-duplicated codes. Callet it. Then, when happy, delete the old structure.
Sounds methodical but doable. The backups are key for peace of mind.
Absolutely. And for seeing how codes relate visually, Project Maps on Windows can display those hierarchy branches nicely.
Okay, let's talk text mining queries.
Right.
Word frequency first. Sounds great for getting a quick overview of common words.
Yeah, and selected files, sets, or codes. Shows results as a list or word cloud. Good starting point.
And you can tweak it minimum word length, combine word stems.
Right. And save the query criteria. Then double-click a word in the results to see it in context. You can code from there, or save all finds for a word as a new code.
Useful. And need to be aware of stop words.
Yes, those common words like the and is that are usually excluded because they don't carry much thematic weight. NVivo has a default list you can edit if needed.
Okay. Then text search queries are similar, but for finding specific words or phrases you're looking for.
Exactly. You specify the term, maybe use wildcards or R for synonyms or quotes for exact phrases. It finds every instance.
And you can see results summarized or as a word tree and save the query again.
Right. Both are powerful tools. The material suggests going beyond the basics, too.
Like running word frequency within a specific code, like community.
Yeah, to see the language used about community. Or comparing frequencies between document types. Using text search to find mentions of a newly emerged theme in already coded files.
Or just routine coding of known keywords or strategic searching if time is tight.
Lots of applications. These queries and others get more attention in the next chapter, apparently.
Okay, so wrapping up this chapter's key takeaways. Code structures change. Review them. Viral coding is chaos. Learn to spot it and build Vista structures instead. And automated tools can handle routine tasks efficiently.
Well summarized. And a few final tips and tricks.
Go on.
Use the recently coded coding stripes view. Gives peace of mind. Shows activity. Use the code description field, well-brief definitions, examples, track changes and memos, backup at key points. And if overwhelmed with potential codes early on, start with memos. See also links. Wait to see what's truly code-worthy.
Good advice. Don't rush to create codes for everything immediately.
Exactly. Let the important themes emerge more organically sometimes.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear that taking coding beyond the basics isn't just about using more features. It's a more deliberate, structured, and reflective way of working.
It really is. Moving past just labeling to really organizing concepts into meaningful hierarchies, understanding the pitfalls of viral coding, the advantages of vista structures.
Using automated tools strategically and constantly reviewing and refining as you go.
And while we've talked a lot about NVivo, these core principles, conceptual order, flexibility versus stability, shifting perspectives, systematic rigor, they apply to any qualitative analysis.
Right. It's about the thinking, not just the software.
Precisely. Moving beyond basic coding is ultimately about empowering yourself to find deeper meaning, generate richer insights from your valuable data.
Okay, final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Think about your own qualitative projects, past or present. Can you pinpoint a time where maybe applying these ideas of hierarchical organization, vista coding, might have made your analysis smoother, clearer, or helped you avoid that code virus?
Yeah, reflect on that. How can these principles enhance your future work? And as always, if you have questions or want to explore specific techniques further,
Don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to hear from you.